Good afternoon. This is U.S. Immigration Attorney Sharifa Tharpe. I'm here live to take your U.S. immigration related questions. Come on in, join me. I have a great topic to talk about today, and it's applying for the green card without the spouse who's mistreating you. If you're going through this situation, your spouse is not cooperating with you, they're not helping you to get permanent residence, there is a way, and I want to talk to you about that way, and talk to you about the benefits of it um, going forward. Now, there are situations where, yes, the spouse does mistreat the immigrant spouse, and they take advantage of the fact that they're here, they're maybe without status, or they don't have any permanent type of status, and they may feel like they have an advantage in the power dynamic. And because of that, the spouse will often do things like threaten to have the immigrant spouse removed, threaten that if they don't do something, that they're going to go ahead and leave them in the process, cancel the process. So if you're in the middle of the process and they're constantly threatening you, it's not too late. You can turn this into your own process. Or the spouse may just be cruel to you. They may be doing this intentionally. You may not have any logic. You may not be able to find the logic in the way that they're treating you. But there's one thing you do know: they are mistreating you, and they're being intentionally cruel towards you, and you know that you can't trust them through your process, or they refuse to apply for your permanent residence. So how do you go forward from here? This is exactly what I help my clients with. And the good news is that there is a path forward, and you can still move forward to get the permanent residence in the United States without the need to leave. You can, if you're, even if you're out of status, even if you've already overstayed, and you can then get your work permit as well as a path to permanent residence. Your work permit would be able to you'd be able to get it in anywhere from 6 months to 12 months, and you'd be able to get your permanent residence anywhere from 2 to 2.5 years after filing. The upside is that this is your process, you're in control. You do not need to have the consent of the spouse who's mistreating you. They will not be involved at all. This is an extremely confidential process. And the way that this process is geared for your protection, because you're the victim in this, and they want to make sure that you have a fair process, and a process that is not necessarily as traumatic. Of course, you can imagine if you're involving a spouse who is mistreating you, that it could still end up being traumatic because it turns into a he said, she said kind of situation. But what the immigration does require is they do require that you present credible evidence. What does evidence look like, especially when you're in a situation where they are emotionally mistreating you, but it's not, they have never physically, and even if they have physically harmed you or threatened you, you don't have that proof. Here's the other advantage, is that any credible evidence counts. That means any believable evidence. So if it means that you can use your statement as evidence, it's acceptable. However, the statement, you have to make sure that you present it proper. No shabby statements, no very vague statements, because that will lead them to deny your case and then say that it wasn't credible. Because what they are looking for is your statement, if they're going to accept it as evidence, is it credible? And so credibility, the way that they determine credibility is by looking at the consistency of your statements, and how specific your statements are in regards to what happened and your experience. So don't downplay your statement in the whole mix. It's going to be very important. But if that's all you have, then it is still worth pursuing this with that as evidence. Other evidence can include, witness statements. It can include text messages. It can include a number of different types of evidence, as long as it does shed light on what you went through and what you experienced, the kind of mistreatment you experienced. So keep in mind that the kinds of mistreatment can be anything. It can be verbal, emotional, mental, financial, even, right? I have had cases where the spouse, the US citizen or legal permanent resident spouse, the way that they financially abused the immigrant spouse was by sending them out to work and when they got back in, they took all their money, or by going ahead and depriving them of money and prohibiting them from working. So from the moment you started to live together, or they started to say things like, you're not allowed to work. And if you work, they're not going to be with you, or they're not going to continue your process anymore. So if you have had experiences like this, but even though they may not have done anything like hit you, that could still qualify you, because nobody should be telling you, if you want to go out there and work and you're not in agreement with staying home and doing other things for that spouse, you have the right to do exactly what you want. Nobody should be telling you that, and or blackmailing you into staying home and doing things in the house, or just doing things that they want you to do. So keep in mind that those who qualify for this, it's very broad, as long as there is there is mistreatment, there is abuse, or there's extreme cruelty involved. So make sure that you go ahead, call, schedule an appointment, so we can talk about what your particular situation is. It could be different. Now, examples of situations that qualify, right? I'm going to give you a plethora, or some examples. So, for example, is the spouse, did the spouse ghost you? Did they lure you to stay, and then as soon as you stayed, or if as soon as you resisted, they ghosted you? Did that US citizen or legal permanent resident spouse threaten to get you deported? Have they tried to threaten you physically? Have they hit you? Have they, forced you to work and or to give you all their money? Have they overspent on your money? Have they caused you to be in debt? And you had played no part in that debt? Have they deprived you of your property or destroyed your property? Have they been on a substance? So are they abusing substances like drugs or alcohol that's driving them to abuse you? Have they mistreated your children? Are your children there, and have they gone ahead and abused or mistreated your own children? All of these types of behaviors do count. Are they controlling? They're prohibiting you from leaving the house, or they're constantly accusing you of cheating. Are they calling you names? Nobody should be living in a kind of situation like that. And so if you are, just know that the first thing you should be doing is scheduling a consultation to get started on a process on your own. Another thing to be wary of is, and I want to give you this warning because I've seen it go badly for some other individuals, is I know you have that gut feeling that if you start the process with your spouse, because you know how your spouse is, that they are going to mess it up for you. If you see those signs, explore doing it on your own. Because if you go ahead and you entrust your immigration process with a spouse like this, who's already showing you the red flags, already mistreating you, there is an increased risk of them not only sabotaging, it's not only just threatening to cancel your process, but straight up sabotaging you and causing you negative immigration consequences. So what I have seen is where, there are red flags, but The spouse, usually they don't know they have an option like this, or they think by going with the spouse it's going to be an easier process, so they just go along with it, hoping that the spouse will go ahead and do right by them. And they usually either, I have seen multiple cases where the US citizen or resident spouse, they have written letters to the immigration telling lies about the motives of the immigrant, to intentionally cause the immigrant to appear as if they're committing marriage fraud, and to have their petition canceled. I have seen spouses go to the interview, and when they get to the interview, they're either, telling the officers that they only got married to help them out, or they are going ahead and just not cooperating, not answering questions intentionally, not saying, giving helpful information to the officer that helps the officer to understand that this is a bona fide marriage. And what happens here is when it gets to that point, it becomes complicated, because now it's on record that there is some sort of problem that could then turn on you as the immigrant. So the immigrant is the one who's usually accused, saying that they entered into a false marriage, when that may not have been true, right? If that was not true, if it is true, you don't have a case, right? I don't represent clients who enter into any kind of business marriages. What I do is I represent clients who they went into a marriage with all the right intentions, and then when the spouse is the one that sabotaged them and told lies to the immigration, and ended up getting them into further problems. But you never wanted to get there. That's why I'm here and I'm talking about this, talking about what I have seen, because I don't ever want anyone to get to that point where they're getting that letter saying that they have 33 days to leave the country. Instead of getting their green card through marriage, they're getting that because the spouse intentionally sabotaged their process. So, if you're not being treated well and you have that gut feeling, right? You have met a US citizen or legal permanent resident spouse. At first, everything seemed great. And then, as soon as you got married, or as soon as you started to get into the process, they start to act shady, they start to mistreat you. Start to follow that gut feeling that you have, and make sure you're protected in the process. Make sure your interests are protected, and make sure you seek counsel for yourself to determine your options going forward. How can you protect yourself? If you file for this spouse will not be notified. As a matter of fact, the communications between you and immigration are protected. And the way that we make sure it's doubly protected is we make sure that I, as an attorney, I do communications with the immigration office, and all paper communications come to our office instead of any residential address, just to make sure that our client is safe throughout the process, especially if they are still residing with that spouse. So, if you are in a situation like this, follow your gut, get the legal advice you need to move forward. Now, once we've determined you qualify, we get everything started right away. If you are in the middle of your process and you want to go ahead and switch it over, we work with immigration to have it switched over from the adjustment of status through marriage over to the your own process through VAWA. Another thing is anybody qualifies. All genders qualify. So not anybody, but if you're being mistreated by a US citizen or resident spouse, you could qualify for this if you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're transgender, if you're gay, if you are in same sex marriage, you still qualify. Even in some states, if you're in a common law marriage, you could still qualify for this. So, say you didn't have the traditional type of marriage, but instead you are recognized by the state as a married couple because of their recognition of common law unions, then this could still qualify you as long as you have that recognized in the state that you're living in. So it's even flexible in that sense. But once we file your documentation, whether you're switching from a process that you're going through now, or you are going to file a brand new one on your own, whether you're with them or you're separated, we go ahead, we get that done. You are able at this time to apply for your work permit while you wait for the process to go through. The work permits are taking about I would say 6 to 8 months on average, but the longest time right now is 12 months. So I do tell my clients to prepare for that could go as long as 12 months, just because processing times are never within the control of the attorney. And if an attorney is telling you that they can get your process done faster, you need to be wary of them, because they may be misleading you. So the processing time is 6 to 12 months for the work permit. But the good news is that for a process that's about 2.5 years, you get your work permit and once you get your work permit and your social security number, you have the ability to apply for a travel document. And once you are able to apply for those and get them, it helps you to be in a stable position until you can get approved for VAWA and then move on to your permanent residence. Once we file everything together, which includes your adjustment of status, once you're approved for the VAWA status, you automatically then get scheduled. Of course, you have to give it some months, but you don't have to apply for a new application. You just go straight on to the adjustment of status process. So that's the good thing, is that it also offers a path to permanent residence. If you are married to a US citizen and once you do get your permanent residence, you can apply for your citizenship in 3 years. So at least at the 2-year, 9-month mark, which is an added benefit. Your children, if they're under 21 and unmarried, can also be included in this petition. Even if they themselves were not mistreated, they will be included in your petition without having to apply for a separate petition for each child. And then once you're approved for VAWA, your children would be able to get adjustment of status. If your children are outside of the US, they would then go to the embassy, get the status to enter the United States. So there are many, many benefits to this. And you may be in a position of uncertainty, but this is where I want to educate you about this, so that you understand that there are options. But don't go and take this information and just go and apply on your own or go do something brash. I always say my rule of thumb here is, if before you do anything major, get legal advice first to make sure you're on the right path, because this is general information and it's not particular legal advice. So make sure that you are protected by getting the proper specific legal advice for you. And then once we determine, we can definitely get started on your process so you can move forward. So it is a good option where your spouse is mistreating you. And what I want to leave you here with is, I know you have that gut feeling. I know you have it, that if this spouse is starting to show those red flags and you're about to enter the process or you're in the middle of the process, follow your gut and protect yourself. By getting legal advice, you can always schedule an appointment with me and we can talk through your situation and determine what the best course of action is for you. But I don't want you to just ignore that gut feeling you have. Leave your process in the hands of a spouse who's mistreating you, and then they turn around, you end up being the one that loses in a very significant way, and they get to move forward. Or sometimes they do that, and I've seen it far too often, not to be able to give you a forewarning. about that. So follow your gut and protect yourself first if you see that the spouse is mistreating you or doing things that you think are not fair to you. Now, go ahead. The next thing is schedule that consultation. You can do that by going to the link in the profile, and you can schedule your own appointment, or you can call the number by going to the website. So there are a number of options that are available for you to go ahead and get in touch. If you schedule the appointment on your own, everything will be booked and ready to go. If you need assistance, you want to make sure you talk to someone at the office, you can do so. We will be out from the 22nd, so the scheduling coordinators will be out on the 22nd and the 23rd, but phones are still open all through the holidays. Our phone lines are still open. So you can always go ahead, give us a call, and then as soon as the scheduling coordinators are available, they will have your information to get in touch with you and to schedule the appointment. So give us the number or the email where we can contact you in a safe way, of course, to schedule that consultation and figure out what the best option is going forward. Now, as always, I'm here to answer questions. So I'm on YouTube, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Facebook. Go ahead, put your questions in the comments, and I will answer those questions. And as always, I'm going to go ahead and start. I see a number of them on Instagram, so I'm going to go ahead and answer some questions on Instagram. Okay, so good day, ITIN. Can you explain what this is? Is it safe to get it? Generally, it's safe to get it. So the ITIN is it's like a tax identification number that is for people who don't have an SSN or don't qualify for an SSN, and this includes immigrants. You can use it for business, to start a business. You can use it to start a bank account. You can use it to apply for loans. You can use it in your mortgage process. You can use it if you're, investing. So it's that, and you use it. Most importantly, you use it to file taxes, because you may not have a social security number. And you may want to file taxes. There are a number of undocumented immigrants who are here who don't have the ability to apply for an SSN or to get an SSN, but they're working and they want to make sure that they're filing those taxes. The ITIN number is going to be the way that they can do that. They can file the taxes. So there is a process where you can file taxes using the W-7 form, and you would be able to get your ITIN number back after a couple of weeks. And then if you're outside of the tax season, you can always use a tax assistance agent who can help you to file those taxes as well. So that's in a nutshell, that's what the ITIN number is. What the ITIN number is it's not a replacement for a social security. So, with everything you need a social security number. You cannot say get an ITIN number and then say it's a social security number. They're complete two different things. We use our SSN to file taxes, and the ITIN number is used to file taxes. But if you're applying for a job and they're asking for your social security number, unless they ask for an ITIN number, you cannot use the ITIN and then say it's a social security number. What if you enter the country illegally? So great question. I think this may be related to VAWA. You enter the country without permission this kind of relief is still available for individuals who have entered the country without permission, so illegally. It does not stop you from applying for VAWA. If you've left and then re-entered, there may be some problems there, but there's always the waiver that you can apply for. So there's always forgiveness that you could apply for to still get the VAWA. So I'm glad that you brought this up. So when you're applying for VAWA, this is relief based on a spouse who's mistreating you. If you've had issues yourself with the police, say sometimes you have the spouse, the actual abusive spouse, call the police. And if they did that to you and you were the one arrested, the policy manual does say that if the arrest was related to the abuse, they would consider it as in the application and forgive it. So waive that any kind of inadmissibility there or problems that may reflect on your good moral character. Um, if you have past immigration violations like misrepresentation or fraud, you could apply for a waiver, and the waiver would be based on you and your qualifying relatives in the United States, the extreme hardships that you or your qualifying relatives would face if you did not get the relief. So this is still something that's available if you came in without permission, if you overstayed, if you're here without status. This is still relief for you, especially for you. Does the USCIS sending a letter saying USCIS is working on your VAWA case? So no, usually what they will send is they'll send the receipt notice acknowledging that they are processing your application, and unless they need something else, they will issue a prima facie. So they'll issue what's called a prima facie determination letter, and that's great. If you get that, it means that they so it's like a review before a final review, and they just review it, see if you have everything there, and say, well, if they had to make a decision today and everything that's in the application were true, they would approve it. But then they pass it on to the officer to do a more detailed review before making the final decision. And the prima facie determination letter is then put in place to allow you to get relief in your state: food stamps, housing assistance, medical assistance, in the meantime. Because remember, when you're in a situation where you're being abused, you're being mistreated, you're being subjected to extreme cruelty, all of which amount to domestic violence and abuse. When you are in that situation, you're vulnerable as well. And if you need that assistance, the prima facie determination letter can then help you to get it. Unfortunately, it's not the same in all states. Some states don't necessarily have a lot of protections, or they don't give a lot of benefits to individuals who have prima facie determination letter. And you really would have to check with the Human Services office in your state to see if that prima facie determination letter could give you the benefits that you need to at least stay on your feet until you get that work permit. But as other than the receipt notice, your biometrics notice to get your fingerprinting done and the prima facie determination letter, you're not going to get constant letters saying they're working on your VAWA case. Great questions. Keep those questions coming. What if your EAD comes with wrong date of birth? What should one do? So you should get it corrected because you want it to reflect the correct information. And unfortunately, yes, that comes with sending it back and having them not necessarily sending it back, but taking the efforts to request a corrected EAD. Which, of course, it may take months, but you want to make sure you get that corrected. Any advice on someone who's been married for over 2 years but have very minimal proof, no joint accounts or lease? So if you've been married for 2 years, I don't know if you're living in different countries. But that's one thing, right? If you've been married for over 2 years, you should have some sort of evidence by then. And so that's what raises the red flags to the immigration officer. You can't you can't go ahead and make evidence out of nothing. You need to make sure that if you're married, you both are doing things that married couples do. And this is where the officer is going to make that assumption that if you haven't, as a couple, and you're here in the United States together, if you haven't gotten it together over the last 2 years, that they're gonna assume this is must be fake, because I don't know any real married couple that they don't have something. So you don't have joint accounts, you don't have a lease. Do you share your car insurance together? Do you share property together? Have you bought each other gifts? Do you have friends and family? Do you go out? Do you have pictures? But keep in mind, pictures don't make your marriage based process. And this is good information too, because this, showing bona fides of the marriage is not only a requirement in the straight up marriage based case, but also in the VAWA cases. But the evidence, we can treat the evidence different, just because an abusive spouse tends to want to minimize the shared property, joint lease. They don't want to do a bank account usually, and so we do get creative with our clients about how to show that they were married in a bona fide marriage with their spouse. But if the both of you are in the process, you're married for 2 years, you must have something. And that's a part of it. With my clients, I don't just represent everybody. I represent clients that I know will be successful in the process. I represent clients because I can look at clients and or potential clients, and I can tell, if they're a disaster, and I can even tell if this is a fake thing, and I want to have nothing to do with that. So, any advice? If you're married for 2 years and you have minimal proof, I would first say, what's going on with the marriage? Is it in trouble? Are you in this very situation that I'm talking about? Because you must have something as a couple that you've been married for 2 years. Now, if you have been married for 2 years, but your spouse is outside of the United States, then that's different, because there's only so much you can do as a married couple living separately, especially if you're young or if you're newlyweds. And so they have different expectations for couples who are living separately outside of the United States. So in that case, you want to use things like your phone records to show you stay in touch. Maybe you send each other money, you send each other gifts, and then maybe you have joint account, maybe you do have a joint lease. Those things can happen too, but there's not the expectation that you're going to be living together, and you may not even be commingling your funds because you're living in two different countries. So if you and your spouse really want to make sure that you're on the right track, this is where it's important to schedule the consultation, and let's talk about that. It may be that you're having a block, but there is always good evidence when you're married for 2 years and it's a real bona fide, genuine marriage. All right, keep those questions coming. These are great questions. Keep it coming. All right, so I'm monitoring the chat on YouTube and the comments on Facebook, and I am getting tons of questions on Instagram. So go ahead, put those questions in, and all of these questions were great questions. Thanks so much. Um, Okay, but I don't see any more. So I'm going to call it a day. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it. I hope I gave you some good, solid information. And I'll come back tomorrow at around noon, where I will talk to you about another topic, and you can think of your questions. Put them in the comments right away. And as soon as I'm finished about talking about my topic, I get straight to your questions. So thanks again, everyone. I will see you tomorrow. Bye bye.